Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking aim at, well, one of the most critical and complex transitions in modern information security.
We really are.
I'm talking about the great migration to quantum-resistant cryptography. And it's no longer a theoretical exercise for cryptographers, is it?
Oh, not at all. This is a hard engineering reality. It demands immediate, very technical planning from, well, basically any organization dealing with long-term data security.
And to tackle this, we've gathered a truly powerful stack of sources today.
Indeed. We're moving beyond the foundational theory here. We're blending academic cryptanalysis with, finalized mandates from critical bodies like the NSA.
Specifically CNSA 2.0.
Exactly, CNSA 2.0, and some incredibly detailed real-world performance and interoperability analyses from NIST, PNNL, and key industry players.
Right, major financial institutions, standards bodies, the whole ecosystem.
The whole thing.
So our mission is straightforward, but it's also demanding. And it's for a technically proficient audience. We're drilling down into the NIST-selected algorithms.
MLChem, MLDSA, SLH-GSA.
Exactly. We want to understand not just the foundational math that makes them quantum safe, but the cold, hard trade-offs. We're talking size, speed, and crucially, real-world hardware integration.
This is for the teams who need to move past the hype, calculate their risk, and start building production systems today.
Right now.
So the big question we need to answer for you is one of prioritization. I mean, given the inevitable performance and size trade-offs these new schemes impose, how do you correctly architect your cryptographic infrastructure?
Which algorithm is genuinely right for which application? And maybe most importantly, how does your organization figure out its non-negotiable deadline for this transition?
Let's unpack this.
Okay, let's start with the why. Why are we suddenly rushing to replace a cryptographic infrastructure that has, served us pretty reliably for decades?
It's because our current cryptographic backbone, the thing that holds up everything, public key, encryption, digital signatures, it's all built on mathematical problems that are, well, exponentially easy for a quantum computer to solve.
And the quantum threat really has two distinct components, right? We talk about Shor's algorithm and then Grover's algorithm.
That distinction is the only place we should start. Shor's algorithm represents the existential threat. It's the one aimed right at asymmetric public key cryptography.
This is the one that gets the exponential speed up.
An exponential speed up, yes. It efficiently solves the two foundational mathematical problems that basically all of modern public key infrastructure rests on.
First being integer factorization,
which breaks RSA.
And the second is the discrete logarithm problem,
which breaks Diffie-Hellman, so DH and ECDH, and elliptic curve cryptography, ECC.
So when you say exponential speed up, we're not talking about a small improvement. We're talking about going from, centuries of computation time down to seconds, at least theoretically.
Theoretically, yes, on a sufficiently large and stable, cryptographically relevant quantum computer ACRQC. That 2048-bit RSA key, or that P256 ECC curve, which we consider robust today against even supercomputers,
is fundamentally compromised.
The mathematical foundation itself is just shattered. It's a polynomial time attack.
Right. Can you explain what that means in practical terms?
It means the time needed to break the key only increases polynomially with the key size, not exponentially. So if you double the key length, the break time might, say, quadruple.
Whereas for a classical computer, doubling the key lengths increases the time by an insane amount.
An astronomical amount, like a factor of 2 to the n. And this is precisely why RSA, DH, and ECC, they're just non-starters for the post-quantum world. They require complete replacement.
So what does that mean for urgency? Are we just waiting for a CRQC to show up on the news?
No, absolutely not. The urgency is immediate.
Why?
Because of the data being collected now. Current guidelines from government and industry suggest that sensitive data should transition away from using RSA as early as 2025.
As in next year.
Next year. And the full migration for both RSA and ECC needs to be prioritized to be complete before 2030. These are not arbitrary dates.
They're calculated risks.
Exactly. Calculated risks based on the projected timeline for a viable CRQC, which is often cited as being, 10 to 20 years away. The replacement has to be in place long before that.
Okay, so Shor's is the killer for public key encryption. But the threat isn't just about that. It also accelerates brute force searching, and that's where Grover's algorithm comes in.
Right, and this one doesn't break symmetric crypto. It diminishes its effective security level.
And that's a critical differentiation.
It is. Grover's algorithm offers a quadratic speedup, not an exponential one. It's for unstructured searches, so think brute forcing a key or finding a collision in a hash function.
Mathematically, it takes searching an n-element space from O(n) down to O square root of n.
Exactly. Which means the effective security level of symmetric primitives like AES, SHA-2, SHA-3, it's effectively halved.
So an AES 128 key,
Yeah.
it's not 128 bits of security anymore.
It drops to only 64 bits of quantum security. And similarly, SHA-256 drops from about 128 bits of pre-image resistance to around 64 bits of quantum resistance.
Which is not a catastrophic failure like with Shor's, but it's not good.
It's not good, and it demands an immediate mitigation strategy.
And the mitigation for symmetric ciphers is thankfully elegantly simple. Just double the key size.
Exactly. Symmetric ciphers remain viable because we can just counteract that quadratic speedup by moving to larger parameters. So for any system that needs 128 bits of long-term post-quantum strength,
which is the current industry standard.
right, for protecting sensitive data, AES 256 becomes the required choice. It offers 256 bits of classical security, which translates to the necessary 128 bits of post-quantum strength against Grover's attack.
And for hashing, you'd move to SHA 512.
You'd move to SHA 384 or SHA 512 to ensure you have sufficient quantum resistance for collision resistance, because SHA 256 will be deemed insufficient.
Okay, so this dual threat, the exponential death of public keys and the quadratic weakening of symmetric keys, it leads us directly to a concept that technical teams really must internalize now.
Yes.
The harvest now, decrypt later imperative, or
Yeah.
HNDL.
HNDL is the core risk model. It's what's driving the current urgency and really what defines your transition deadline. The threat is that adversaries, and we're talking primarily state actors here,
Right.
are currently intercepting and archiving massive amounts of encrypted communications. TLS sessions, VPN tunnels, digital documents, everything.
Do it today.
Today, with the explicit intent of decrypting it all later, once that CRQC becomes available, likely within that 10 to 20-year window.
So the lifespan of the data is what dictates the urgency of the cryptographic transition. If my communication is about dinner plans for tonight, who cares?
Exactly.
But if it's the blueprints for a next-generation fighter jet or decades of sensitive medical records, that's a whole different story.
It's a completely different matter, and our sources note that the relevance of HNGL varies dramatically by sector.
For sure.
For transactional systems, like most current financial services, think about EMVCo smart card cryptograms, which are dynamic and expire almost instantly. That data is pretty much inconsequential for HNDL risk. The transaction is just too short.
But the moment you touch long-lived data, the calculus changes completely.
Instantly. If your data has a long shelf life, medical records, PII, intellectual property, state secrets that have to remain confidential for 30 years, that data requires immediate proactive planning.
You have to assume it's already being harvested.
You have to assume it's in a massive archive somewhere. A state-level actor doesn't need to decrypt it today. They just need to have the ciphertext ready for when their CRQC is ready.
This means it requires more than just buying new software. It's a deep organizational audit.
The required action isn't panic, it's rigorous threat analysis and data inventory. Organizations have to assess the time value and the long-term shelf life of their data.
Right.
So if your data needs to be confidential for 5 years, but the most conservative timeline says a CRQC is 10 years away, you have a 5-year security margin. You're okay.
But if that data needs to stay secret for 20 years, and the CRQC arrives in 15?
You are operating at a 5-year confidentiality deficit, and you're doing it right now, today.
And that deficit necessitates an immediate, aggressive crypto transition plan.
It does. The key takeaway here is that you must adopt cryptographic agility, the ability to swap out algorithms quickly, and you have to perform this data lifespan analysis immediately.
Because the life cycle of this infrastructure is so long.
So long. From the slow pace of standards adoption to hardware procurement and deployment, waiting even a few years is basically the same as accepting a major, unmitigated HNDL risk.
Okay, let's transition to the solutions. Years of this rigorous global competition that NIST kicked off back in 2016, we finally have a finalized set of standards. We know what the future looks like cryptographically.
We do. The foundational choices are now fixed thanks to the FIPS 203, 204, and 205 standards that are coming out. For key encapsulation mechanisms, or CHEMs.
Which replace Diffie-Hellman and RSA key exchange.
Exactly. For chems, NIST selected ML-Chem, which is based on the Crystals-Kyber algorithm.
And for digital signatures, which are critical for replacing ECDSA and RSA signatures.
There, we have 2 primary finalists selected for standardization. MLDSA, which is crystals dilithium, and SLHDSA, which is Syncellese S plus Me.
It's also important to note Falcon was selected for future standardization, right? It targets a specific niche.
Right, FNDSA. And HQC was chosen as a second chem in round 4, but really, Kyber remains the primary recommendation.
This landscape immediately highlights a fundamental sort of philosophical divide in PQC design.
It really does.
You have Kyber, dilithium, and Falcon on one side, all relying on the hardness of lattice problems, and then you have Syncellese plus taking a completely different, much more conservative hash-based approach.
That's right. The lattice-based schemes, Kyber and dilithium in particular, are the leaders in efficiency. They're grounded in the mathematical hardness of the module learning with errors problem, or MLWE.
And this is a problem that's been studied pretty extensively.
Extensively. The current consensus is that it's hard even for a quantum computer. And the reason they're so efficient is that they leverage algebraic structure, specifically polynomial rings, to speed up computation.
Okay, let's get into the deep technical nuance of Kyber, or ML-Chem. We hear its performance is exceptional. How does it actually achieve that speed without giving up security?
Kyber's efficiency is fundamentally dependent on operating within a very specific mathematical structure, a polynomial ring we call RQ.
R sub Q.
Right. And the core of any public key operation, key generation, encapsulation, decapsulation, it all requires these complex polynomial multiplications. Kyber gets its high throughput by performing this operation extremely fast using something called the number theoretic transform, or NTT.
And for the listener, we often talk about the NTT as like the cryptographic equivalent of a fast Fourier transform. How does that translate to a practical speed game here?
Well, in standard polynomial multiplication, where you multiply two polynomials, a of x and b of x, the computational complexity scales quadratically with the degree of the polynomial.
So O(n) squared, which is slow.
It's slow. The NTT is the secret sauce. It transforms the problem from polynomial multiplication into a simple, very efficient, coefficient-wise multiplication in the transform domain.
So instead of multiplying out every single term, you just transform the polynomials, multiply the coefficients one by one, and then reverse the transform.
Exactly. This conversion allows the complexity to drop dramatically, typically down to O(n) log n.
And that's a huge difference.
It's a massive difference. It means Kyber can handle the larger security parameters, like what's required for level V, with computation times that are competitive with, or sometimes even faster than, current ECC schemes. That O(n) log n performance is why Kyber has such a great balance across all three core chem operations.
Of course, the design has to ensure the highest level of security. You mentioned it achieves IND-CCA2 security, which is absolutely critical for chems. How's that done?
It uses a slightly tweaked version of the Fujisaki-Okamoto transform, the FO transform. The essential purpose of this transform is to take a base chem, which is only secure against passive attacks.
IND-CPA secure.
Right, IND-CPA. And it mathematically transforms it into one that's secure against active chosen ciphertext attacks, which is IND-CCA2.
So it hardens it.
It hardens it. It uses hash functions to combine elements of the secret key and the ciphertext. This ensures that if an attacker tries to tamper with the ciphertext during transmission, the decapsulation on the other end will fail to produce the correct shared secret. It's a non-negotiable mechanism for real-world security.
I found the details around how Kyber handles its public key randomness fascinating. This against-all-authority approach for generating the public random matrix A. What's the security purpose of that?
That's a great point. In lattice cryptography, if an attacker could find a short basis for the lattice defined by that public matrix A, they could potentially break the system.
Okay.
Now, if A is generated by some central authority, and that authority gets compromised, an attacker might be able to use that vulnerability to attack all users whose keys share that same generation process.
That's the all for the price of one attack.
Exactly. By using an against-all-authority approach, Kyber makes sure that A is generated pseudo-randomly using an unpredictable seed that's derived from the user's own keys. So A is unique for every single instance, which prevents that kind of wholesale compromise.
Let's delve even deeper into a subtlety that's often missed. The link between Kyber's optimization and a potentially weaker security assumption.
Yeah.
You mentioned the compressed Q function and the learning with rounding, or LWR.
This is a great point of nuance that really shows the engineering trade-offs. Kyber needs to keep its ciphertext size small.
Of course.
To do this, it uses a function, compressQ, that involves rounding the high-precision coefficients down to fewer bits for transmission. The act of sampling the noise, E prime, and then compressing it introduces a rounding error term.
And when you rely on that rounding process to hide information,
You are leaning on the hardness of the learning with rounding problem, LWR, in addition to the primary MLWE assumption.
and is LWR considered as strong as MLWE?
Generally, no. MLWE is considered the gold standard for lattice security. LWR is often seen as slightly weaker because the errors are deterministic, they come from the rounding process, rather than being purely random noise sampled from a distribution like in standard LWE.
But the designers think it's still secure enough?
They do. They believe that for the parameters used, especially at higher security levels, the schemes remain secure. But this compromise, sacrificing a tiny theoretical security margin for significant gains in practical efficiency and smaller ciphertexts, that is the kind of decision that defines modern PQC engineering.
And you said this is most prominent in Kyber 512?
Exactly. Kyber 512 is where this link to LWR is most explicit because of its smaller module dimension.
Fascinating. So optimization equals complexity. Okay, moving on to signatures, the lithium, or MLDSA, seems to be the general-purpose lattice signature workhorse.
The lithium is the pragmatic choice. It's also lattice-based, relying on MLWE alongside the module short integer solution, or MSIS, problem. Its design goal was really to balance three things: solid security, relatively high performance, and implementation simplicity.
And that third factor, simplicity, is key.
It's why it's the primary and most mature candidate for immediate integration into standard protocols like TLS and VPNs. While its signatures are large,
And they are large.
they are typically 2.4 kilobytes up to 4.6 kilobytes for level 5, but that size is deemed manageable for most general-purpose applications.
Okay, but if dilithium is the pragmatic choice, what niche does Falcon really fill? Why deal with the significant mathematical and engineering complexity it brings?
That's where Falcon FNDSA comes in. It is the signature scheme designed specifically for extreme size constraints. It leverages highly advanced mathematical techniques, including NTRU lattices and specialized methods like fast Fourier sampling.
And the trade-off is compactness.
Astonishing compactness. Falcon 512 signatures can be as small as 666 bytes, and public keys around 897 bytes. This makes it incredibly appealing for resource-constrained environments.
So, IoT devices, embedded systems, smart cards.
Exactly. Anywhere that every single byte of storage and bandwidth is at a premium.
There's a massive engineering trade-off for that size advantage. We can't just gloss over that.
Absolutely not. Falcon's implementation complexity is on another level compared to dilithium. Fast Fourier sampling requires extremely precise, high-resolution floating-point arithmetic. If that numerical precision is even slightly off,
The signature could become invalid.
invalid, or worse, it could leak information about the key. This high dependence on strict numerical fidelity makes it really hard to implement correctly and efficiently across diverse hardware platforms.
So what about security hardening? Is it more vulnerable?
Crucially, yes. Falcon is highly susceptible to side-channel attacks, especially timing attacks and cache timing attacks.
Because the execution time can vary?
Precisely. The sampling process involves complex, iterative loops and floating-point operations whose execution time can vary based on the secret key values. Attackers can potentially observe those timing differences.
So secure integration requires extreme diligence.
It forces developers to implement countermeasures like constant time execution, which is a major complexity burden that dilithium's design inherently avoids. Falcon requires expert-level cryptographic engineering just to be safe.
Okay, let's pivot to SysFinCS Plus Tilet, or SLHDSA. This one completely avoids lattices. It seems to be the ultimate conservative choice, trading performance for pure cryptanalytic assurance.
SysFinCS Plus takes a unique and, yes, highly conservative path. Its security relies solely on the conjectured robustness of well-understood cryptographic hash functions, typically SHA-2 or SHA-3.
And that approach is attractive because hash functions have a much longer, simpler history of cryptanalysis than these newer, more complex lattice problems.
Exactly.
So it offers a kind of cryptographic certainty. We trust SHA-2, so we trust SysFinCS Plus. But what is the cost of that certainty?
A truly massive cost, both in size and in computation.
How so?
The underlying structure involves things like Merkle trees and requires generating a huge number of internal one-time signature keys. This conservatism results in signature sizes that are orders of magnitude larger than anything else we've discussed.
We're talking 8 to 30 kilobytes.
Kilobytes. That is, as you said earlier, 30 to 50 times larger than a traditional ECDSA signature.
Wait, 30 kilobytes for a single signature? That's enormous. That's more than the entire TLS payload for many simple connections used to be.
It is.
How does that impact actual implementation?
Well, it severely limits its applicability. You can't use it in bandwidth or performance-sensitive environments. Imagine a high-volume trading platform or a cellular IoT device trying to send thousands of these signatures per second.
The network bandwidth, the storage, the processing requirements,
Yeah.
they just become prohibitive.
Completely prohibitive.
So given that heavy overhead, where does SGDCS Plus actually shine? What is its intended operational niche?
SFIN-CS Plus is ideally suited for applications where that long-term security assurance outweighs any concern about size or latency.
Okay.
Think of high-assurance, long-lived data integrity. Signing root certificates higher up in a certificate chain. Signing firmware images that must remain verifiable for the lifetime of a physical product. Or signing immutable data repositories.
So if you're signing a root certificate that will live for 20 years and rarely ever changes,
then the 30 KB signature size is a minor operational expense for that heightened security guarantee.
there's one other critical operational difference with SFIN-CS Plus and other hash-based schemes that we have to talk about. Statefulness.
Yes, this is a huge deal. Unlike lattice schemes, which are essentially stateless, SFIN-CS Plus is a stateful signature scheme. Meaning each private key can only be used to generate a finite number of signatures, and you must maintain and track the state which subkey index was last used. If you reuse a key index, even once,
The entire security of the private key collapses.
it's gone. And this state management introduces a massive operational burden for system administrators that just doesn't exist with traditional RSA or ECC, which are stateless and can sign indefinitely. This is yet another reason why SFIN-CS Plus is reserved for very specific, manageable use cases.
This contrast, this size for security trade-off, perfectly sets up our next discussion. The cold, hard engineering reality of PQC deployment. This is where the mathematical purity really confronts practical limits.
Limits like network bandwidth, RAM, and hardware constraints. And the primary reality shock is indeed the size overhead. Technical teams cannot ignore this inflation.
Let's quantify it again, just to drive it home.
Using specific level 1 or level 2 examples, so for reasonable security, Kyber 512 chem ciphertext is 768 bytes. Dilithium signatures range from 2,420 bytes up to 4,627 bytes for level 5.
And some, as we just noted, can hit 30 KB.
And that immediately imposes severe constraints on resource-constrained environments. We're talking about embedded systems, IoT devices, or critically existing hardware like smart cards.
Take EMV chip cards.
Absolutely. Those devices have extremely limited non-volatile memory and RAM. Industry analyses estimate that migrating these devices to support PQC algorithms will require 4 to 6 times more resident RAM than is used in many current designs.
4 to 6 times. That's huge.
Which means updating millions of existing smart cards via firmware is often just impossible. Many of these constrained devices simply can't be economically upgraded. They might require complete hardware replacement.
Or a painful shift back to symmetric-only authentication, which limits functionality.
Exactly.
And this size impact isn't just about storage, it's about network latency. Let's look at the computational efficiency, the benchmarking data, and maybe dispel the myth that PQC is universally sluggish.
The empirical data tells a very nuanced and often surprisingly positive story about CPU usage. If we compare classical schemes like RSA 2048 and ECC P256 against PQC candidates like Kyber 512, Dilithium II, and Falcon 512, the picture is far from bleak.
I noticed in the data that RSA 2048 is remarkably fast for decryption, its main job, but it's agonizingly slow for key generation.
It is.
Kyber 512, on the other hand, achieves a dramatically favorable balance across all three operations.
That speed is the direct benefit of that NTT optimization we discussed earlier. Kyber's key generation is significantly faster than RSA's, and it's highly competitive with ECC P256.
Which makes it really suitable for high-performance TLS environments where you're doing key generation and exchange constantly.
Exactly. It's basically proven that high-speed lattice cryptography is now a viable engineering reality.
Okay, looking at signatures, what do the benchmarks tell us about the choice between Dilithium and Falcon?
Dilithium offers efficient signing. That's the operation a server needs for generating responses or signing firmware. But its verification time is typically slower than Falcon's.
And Falcon is the fastest in verification.
Right, which is ideal for clients or systems that spend most of their time checking signatures rather than creating them. But again, that verification speed in Falcon comes with the prerequisite of demanding strict numerical precision. It makes secure implementation so much more complex.
And this efficiency holds up even on extremely constrained hardware. which should ease some anxiety for teams managing, say, industrial control systems or specialized embedded devices.
It should.
Tell us about the PNNL EVCI benchmark results on those ARM Cortex SOMs.
This is a crucial finding that really should be circulated widely. PNL tested these algorithms on typical system-on-modules, or SOMs, found in industrial equipment.
Like the ARM Cortex A8, A53, A9.
The kinds of things you find in EV charger control units. And the empirical finding was striking. PQC algorithms like Kyber and dilithium frequently outperform the classical ECC P521 curve.
Outperformed. In what way?
In terms of handshake time, memory usage, and operational latency.
Wow. That is a massive operational finding. So if an organization's existing system can handle the computational load of the high-security ECC P521 curve today,
then the computational performance hit of transitioning to Kyber or dilithium for key exchange should be negligible. It might even be a net positive in terms of raw CPU processing time.
So the lesson here is that the bottleneck for PQC is not raw CPU cycles.
It's data size and network throughput. While the PQC systems did require slightly more resident memory during TLS handshake tests, the increase was minimal and totally acceptable for the SOMs they evaluated. The true challenge is the TLS handshake slowdown,
caused by the increased size of all the cryptographic elements, the keys, ciphertexts, certificates traversing the network. This is where theory meets network reality. Tell us about the Cloudflare research on handshake latency.
The network reality is often brutal when you're dealing with large cryptographic elements. The research showed that a relatively small 9 kilobyte increase in the total size of data transferred during a TLS handshake can cause a 15% slowdown in the completion time.
And the latency penalty scales non-linearly.
It does. If you go above 10 or 11 kDesh, which is easily done with dilithium level 5 signatures combined with Kyber chems, you could see a massive 60% reduction in handshake completion speed.
A 60% slowdown. Right. And that dramatic drop happens because the larger key sizes push the total payload over common network maximum segment size limits, right? Which leads to fragmentation.
That's the key technical reason. You start incurring packet fragmentation, or the initial flight of the TLS handshake is forced to spill over into additional round trips to complete the exchange.
So when you look at hybrid implementations, which are necessary for the transition, the costs are concrete.
Very concrete. Combining ECDSA P521 with dilithium 5, for example, results in a slowdown coefficient of over 4.06 compared to ED 25514.
Fourfold increase in latency.
It's a mandatory network overhead during the transition that has to be factored into your application performance SLAs.
However, that cost isn't universal. For long-lived, stable connections, that initial overhead gets amortized pretty quickly.
Yes. For sure. Consider industrial protocols like OCPP over cellular links for EV charging, or long-running VPN tunnels. If a connection lasts for days or weeks, that initial handshake delay of a few hundred milliseconds becomes entirely inconsequential.
It's weighed against the connection's overall lifespan and the absolute necessity of quantum-safe key exchange.
Right. The criticality of the slowdown depends entirely on the application architecture. High-volume, short-lived connections are the ones that suffer the most.
So given all the urgency and the performance trade-offs, how are technical teams actually advised to transition? Let's start with the pragmatic necessity of hybrid cryptography.
Hybrid cryptography is not optional. It is the most pragmatic and essential path forward. It just means combining a classical algorithm like X25519 or ECC P256 with a quantum-resistant algorithm like Kyber for the key exchange.
Why do both, though? If we trust Kyber, why keep the classical scheme?
It acts as an insurance policy. It guarantees security against two different failure modes simultaneously.
Ah, okay.
First, it ensures backward compatibility with legacy systems that can't speak PQC yet. And second, it offers protection against the currently unknown.
So if Kyber is found to have a flaw,
if the PQC scheme, Kyber, is found to have a flaw that breaks the lattice assumption, your security falls back on the classical algorithm X25519. Conversely, if a CRQC arrives early and breaks X25519, your communication is still secured by Kyber.
You need both to sleep well at night.
You really do.
And this hybrid strategy immediately demands cryptographic agility.
Absolutely. Organizations have to design or update their systems to support interchangeable cryptographic primitives. You cannot afford to hard-code one algorithm set, whether it's RSA only or Kyber only, that locks you in for the next 20 years.
Agility means creating an abstracted cryptography.
Right, one that lets you swap out primitives. For example, switching from Kyber Level 3 to Kyber Level V, or swapping out dilithium for Falcon without requiring a comprehensive system redesign.
And we have clear governmental mandates guiding this transition, notably the NSA's Commercial National Security Algorithm Suite 2.0, CNSA 2.0.
CNSA 2.0 is the clearest signal of urgency we have. It formally deprecates the use of RSA, DH, and ECC for national security systems when mandated. It forces a complete shift away from these classical vulnerable schemes.
What specifically does CNSA 2.0 mandate for PQC? And what security level are we talking about?
It mandates level V parameters. That's designed to provide 256 bits of classical security and 128 bits of post-quantum security, the highest level of assurance needed for long-lived, sensitive national data.
The algorithm.
Specifically, the NSA mandates Crystal's Kyber, level V, for key establishment, and Crystal's dilithium, level V, for digital signatures. For symmetric crypto, AES 256 and SHA 384 or 512 are required.
I find the exception they made for software and firmware signing particularly insightful. The NSA approved the existing hash-based signatures, LMS and XMSS, for immediate adoption there.
They did.
Even though dilithium is a general signature scheme, I do.
That was a highly pragmatic and risk-averse choice. LMS and XMSS are based purely on hash functions, so their cryptanalytic history is extremely solid. They also offer strong state management that's suitable for the specific use case of software.
We're managing the state tracking which key was used for which firmware version is relatively simple.
It's manageable, and this allows organizations to move to quantum-resistant signatures for critical infrastructure functions now, rather than waiting for FIPS 204 and 205 to be fully implemented in all the necessary hardware and firmware. It's a bridge solution using a proven, conservative primitive.
This sets the stage for a very tight organizational timeline for anyone who owns or operates national security systems, which often dictates the speed of the global supply chain.
The CNSA 2.0 transition timeline is aggressive, and it's non-negotiable for their systems. The critical milestones are, first, by 2025, new software and firmware must use CNSA 2.0 signing algorithms.
So LMS, XMSS, or dilithium V.
Right. Then, by 2030, all deployed software and firmware must transition to the new suite. And ultimately, by 2033, the goal is full CNSA 2.0 adherence across all system components, networking equipment, web browsers, operating systems.
That 3 to 8 year window means industrial and financial sectors have to begin their planning process immediately.
The deadlines are here. But beyond the algorithms and the timelines, the single biggest organizational obstacle for organizations trying to meet these deadlines is it's a lack of internal governance. It's the crisis of cryptographic inventory.
Right. If you can't find your keys, you certainly can't replace.
Exactly. Global studies, including research cited in our sources, show this major organizational blind spot. A large percentage of companies just don't have a proper inventory of their keys and certificates.
What are the numbers?
For example, only around 52% of organizations even track where their keys are stored. And many participants in surveys admit they don't even know the total number of keys or certificates they own.
That means half of the organizations out there can't even begin to scope the migration project.
And PTC algorithms just exacerbate this operational nightmare. We're moving from the relative simplicity of stateless RSA and ECC to schemes that introduce significantly more complexity.
Like, say, CNCS plus requiring state management.
Exactly. We see new, more stringent entropy requirements. There are far more configuration parameters. This means the transition is so far from a simple cryptographic swap. It requires a deep, rigorous inventory, a key lifecycle management overhaul, and a centralized control process that most organizations just lack. The organizational effort is the largest blocker, not the math.
Okay, moving into the final sections, let's explore some specific, painful implementation barriers, particularly at the existing protocol layer. This transition is breaking decades-old standards in unexpected ways.
It is.
The electric vehicle charging infrastructure, or EVCI, provides a powerful and timely case study in how these new PQC requirements break existing standards. Structure.
The EVCI ecosystem is a perfect microcosm of critical infrastructure. You have the EV, the Charging Station Management System, or CSMS, and the charging network provider, and protocols like ISO 15118.
That's the vehicle-to-station communication.
Right, and then OCPP and OCPI. They all rely heavily on TLS and digital signatures for secure plug-and-charge functionality. This entire architecture is susceptible to the PQC data size inflation.
So what's the specific technical point of failure that was identified in EVCI systems when you introduced PQC?
It's a simple, seemingly innocuous limitation in the protocol schema. a fixed certificate size barrier, specifically the ISO 1511820 standard, which governs the secure communication path. Its underlying XML schema defines a maximum certificate length of 1,600 bytes.
Which was perfectly adequate for RSA and ECC certificates. They're usually under 1,000 bytes.
Right. But as we established, PQC signatures are massive.
They are.
Even if you optimize for size and use the smallest quantum secure loop certificate, Falcon 512, which is designed for compactness, the certificate size is 1906 bytes.
So that single certificate already surpasses the ISO 1511820 limit by over 300 bytes.
It's a catastrophic protocol failure.
What's the consequence? What happens if the EVCC, the vehicle's charging controller, tries to send an authorization message with that oversized certificate?
The SECC, the charging station controller, it processes the XML schema, identifies the size violation, and immediately responds with a failed message. It just triggers a session termination.
So this is not a performance degradation. It is an absolute protocol-level breakage.
Completely. Caused entirely by the increased data size of PQC schemes that the original standards body just never accounted for.
So this isn't solvable with faster CPUs. It's a structural incompatibility that requires engineering intervention, not just swapping out an algorithm. What are the specific engineering solutions required to fix this?
The fix requires two major steps, and they involve updating the protocol standard itself, which is a political and, time-consuming process. First, the ISO 1511820 XML schema has to be formally updated by the standards body to increase the certificate type's maximum length.
And what's the recommendation?
Based on analyses, the recommendation is to increase it to at least 12,288 bytes.
1,000 bytes. That's nearly a 10-fold increase over the original limit.
It is. But it's necessary to provide flexibility for dilithium level V and any future hybrid or padded schemes. The second required solution is establishing a mechanism for crypto agility within the protocol negotiation itself.
So they need a way to signal PQC support without immediately sending a massive certificate that breaks compatibility with older stations.
Precisely. The EBCC needs to create and include a PQC extension URN, a standardized unique resource name, in its initial application protocol request.
Like a flag.
A flag. If the SECC supports PQC, it selects that URN and they proceed with the larger PQC certificate chain and the updated length limits. If the SECC doesn't recognize the URN, they just fall back to the established classical ECC-based protocol. This standardized signaling is essential for a measured mixed fleet transition.
And we see this size problem mirrored in other critical EVCA protocols too, like OCPP, the Open Charge Point Protocol.
Yes. OCPP suffers from the exact same fixed limits. The current maximum size for certificates, signing requests, and OCSP responses is typically hard-coded to around 5,500 bytes.
And a dilithium certificate can exceed that.
Easily. When you use common encoding methods like PEM encoding, which adds significant length overhead from base64 encoding and metadata, a dilithium 2 certificate quickly swells beyond that 5.5 keto B limit. The same structural incompatibility forces engineers to update every single maximum length parameter in the protocol definition, one by one.
Okay, switching gears from protocols to hardware. The Achilles heel for many organizations, particularly those in critical infrastructure and finance, is going to be hardware security modules, or HSMs.
HSMs are absolutely critical for securing high-value, long-lived keys. They're designed to be tamper-resistant, highly secure, but inherently constrained devices.
Right.
And while those general-purpose SOMs we talked about can handle PQC algorithms and software, HSMs often lack the computational flexibility and storage capacity needed for the new, larger keys and computationally intensive PQC operations.
And since the standards are so new, there's a significant compliance lag.
There's a critical market gap. There is a notable absence of market availability for HSMs that are compliant with the forthcoming FIPS 204 for MLDSA and FIPS 203 for MLChem.
And getting FIPS certification is a lengthy, multi-year process.
It is. So the certified hardware is lagging far behind the finalized standards, creating a severe bottleneck for secure, compliant deployment across government and regulated industries.
So organizations trying to meet that 2025 CSA deadline are left scrambling for a solution to secure their new Kyber and dilithium keys.
They are. The alternatives being explored focus on flexibility. Developers are increasingly looking at soft HSMs, software simulations that run inside a trusted execution environment, a TE or firmware-based trusted platform modules, FTPMs.
Because they're easier to update.
Exactly. These alternatives offer a significantly more flexible pathway for quickly supporting updates and patches, which is absolutely crucial for maintaining crypto agility as the standards inevitably evolve over the next decade. Hard, unpatchable hardware is the enemy of agility.
Let's dedicate some time now to the unique challenge faced by the finance industry. Digital signatures and this long-term commitment problem. You call this the real problem in finance.
It is, because it goes right back to HNDL and the data lifespan. Financial, legal, and regulatory commitments often rely on digital signatures that have to be verifiably valid for 20, 30, even 50 years.
So legal agreements, mortgages, shareholder reporting, regulatory filings.
All of that. It's simple to swap out a key exchange protocol for a daily TLS session. It's immensely difficult to manage a cryptographic commitment for half a century against an unpredictable quantum threat horizon.
So how do they manage that commitment lifetime when the underlying cryptographic assurance, the signature on a contract from 2010, is fundamentally uncertain?
They cannot rely on the original signature alone. They need to use a mechanism called qualified timestamping. This involves a highly trusted third party known as a qualified timestamping authority, or QTSA.
What does the QTSA do?
It takes the original document, the original signature, and the classical public key, and it bundles them all together. Then it applies a new PQC resilient signature overlay onto that bundle.
So the new timestamp essentially asserts the validity of the document at a given date, and that assertion is secured by a known quantum resilient scheme like dilithium or Siski and CS plus deck.
Exactly. The timestamp acts as a cryptographic overlay. It verifies that the document existed in its current state on a specific date, and that assertion is secured by a signature scheme believed to be quantum resistant.
And the beauty of this is that the timestamping process itself is designed to be crypto-agile.
Meaning the timestamping body can repeat this process as new cryptographic standards emerge.
So if dilithium is superseded in 5 years?
Or if a breakthrough necessitates a shift to hash-based signatures entirely, the QTSA can just give the document a new timestamp secured by that next standard. This allows for repeated extension of the verifiable lifetime, mitigating the risk of the original private key ever being compromised and used to forge the document retrospectively.
And in this specific use case, long-term archiving and timestamping, the size and performance drawbacks of, say, CEC+, might actually become acceptable trade-offs.
Absolutely. When the signature only needs to be generated once every few years for the timestamp overlay, latency and a 30 KB file size are irrelevant compared to the need for ultimate, conservative, cryptanalytic assurance. This is a perfect example of how the application defines the algorithm choice.
This entire conversation really emphasizes that the transition to quantum resistance is first and foremost an organizational and engineering challenge. It's far more than a theoretical one. We've covered a massive amount of technical ground here.
We have. And to reiterate the core PQC strategies and the lessons learned, Crystal's Kyber and dilithium strike the best balance for general efficiency and adoption.
And that's largely due to the massive speed gains from the number theoretic transform optimization.
Right. Falcon offers that critical compactness, but it introduces significant implementation complexity, strict numerical precision demands, and high side channel risks.
And CSV and CS Plus offers the ultimate conservative security based on hashes, but it carries that crippling penalty of massive signature sizes and mandatory state management.
And the practical implementation challenges are almost always centered on data size, not CPU speed.
Exactly. The performance concerns are often manageable, especially since highly optimized Kyber implementations can actually outperform ECCP 521 on constrained hardware.
But the size increase breaks existing, hard-coded protocol constraints, like that 1600 byte certificate limit in ISO 151-1820, and that requires fundamental engineering solutions like protocol extensions and schema updates, which introduce standardization delays.
So what does all this mean for you, the technical professional who has to implement this in the field? What's the immediate action item?
Well, the transition to PQC requires far more than just swapping algorithms in a library. It demands a fundamental organizational overhaul toward cryptographic agility and rigorous inventory management. You must first find every single key and certificate you own, map its lifespan, and only then can you begin planning the architectural shift toward hybrid schemes.
And our final provocative thought. If the computational performance hurdle is demonstrably overcome by highly optimized schemes like Kyber, what remains the biggest practical constraint to hitting those CNSA 2.0 timelines?
The biggest remaining constraint is the lack of standardized, easily upgradable, quantum-compliant hardware security modules in critical infrastructure. Their inflexibility poses a serious risk to the planned transition timelines.
So you should prioritize investment in HSM flexibility now.
And look into alternative patchable key management solutions, like soft HSMs running in Ts now, or risk a complete system bottleneck down the line.
Which brings us back to your personal non-negotiable deadline. You must consider where the long-lived data in your infrastructure resides and what the quantum shelf life of that data truly is. That calculation defines your personal deadline, and for many organizations, that deadline is much, much closer than you think.